what's going on.
Oh, I guess this is a set and we're sharing it.
Oh, okay, we're.
Yeah, it's a whole set. Nice.
This is just the larger scale of this.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Does it show more than that? No, it doesn't show
No,
more than that.
it's just easier to read.
Yeah, okay.
Right, it's the environmental one.
Do we have anything? 95 feet. They never tell us the total distance.
In relationship to where we are right now,
Understand this.
Over here,
it's over here.
the next field.
Did you want me to put a board up for you guys?
Do you have a map that includes the property around the site?
Proposed site.
Oh, there.
Oh, the
good.
tax map?
Yeah,
Oh,
good.
that's good,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
good.
That's, I'd say you're pretty much right
Real
right
close.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right over the
Yeah,
line.
this is one of the
right
closest I've ever gone to a town hall.
Okay, that's all I need, yeah.
So the houses in question are these here.
What about the log house?
Raised as to how that's interpreted. The legal opinion that we saw was that, you know, you're measuring to the residence, so like the residential structure, but as far as the commercial site, I think that the site would be that site.
Yeah,
The whole thing.
Because the parking lot, the access, all of that is, so, you know, the structure of the proposed retail isn't necessarily, you're not measuring from the structure, the retail.
It's not from residence to our commercial building.
Not to your building, it's from the residence to the
our
commercial
property
site.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
So what
little-
would be considered the site, anything that they,
And the,
I think you'd be talking to the, pretty much the property line.
property line? So we're talking 90 feet to the one residence.
and the rule is 1,000?
That's
Right.
what your section, yeah,
The section
538.
I
538.
reread that a couple of times to make sure I understand.
Now, you certainly could, that's an opinion that we saw through a land use attorney that we, you know, just for clarification to advise, the town could certainly get an interpretation from their legal counsel if they chose to for that. But in the absence of that, that's what I have to offer as far as, you know, how that was.
Also, is the speed limit there,
It's
what is it?
35.
It's
35.
35?
Yeah, it goes up 35 around the
Do you know what the site distance is for the driveway?
I haven't measured it yet, but it is, there's not much elevation change between where our location's gonna be and, you know, to the north and south on New York State Route 357. And there's not much in the way of curvature of the road.
And it's difficult to separate the issues, but things
Right.
like a wetland or the, you know, possible impact to the environment, things like that, you guys aren't looking at the construction of the building.
Right.
You're looking at the variance from
Oh, okay.
the town
So
zoning
really,
law.
that's really our main
And
thing.
exactly,
That was
because
the only thing.
if a variance was granted,
Then
all of
all
those
those
other
other
things are
things.
gonna go through
Oh,
a
right.
review with the planning board. Your
Right,
jurisdiction
right,
is that,
right,
you know,
right.
does this undermine the zoning law based on
Right,
the
right.
amount of variance?
Right.
I hate to use the word precedence, but in the sense
Oh,
that
yeah.
how these other, this is going to apply to other things as well.
Oh, right.
So that's just some of the, and obviously your work, that's kind of a paraphrasing your
That kinda
worksheet
helps,
questions,
so.
but your worksheet questions are what are gonna drive
Right.
that consideration, and with an area variance, you're weighing the benefits to the applicant versus potential detriment to the community, not just the neighbors as far as an impact, but the zoning law as it applies to the town and the securities it
Well,
provides.
when we do the vote.
Exactly.
yes, when we do the
People
vote,
within
but
that
we should have
distance,
Right.
the security it provides.
It is, but it's more than just the affected neighbors, because this is, again, if by setting a certain practice, if you guys say, hey, 300 feet is good enough, then that's almost, it's not changing the text of the zoning law, but as far as practice goes, you've now kind of, had that impact. I think in this case, because it is certainly close to a residential settled area, it's almost like the extreme in the sense that, versus if this was done in an area where there were
I saw
very
that
little
online.
anything else, it may not be as clear when looking at it.
Right.
This is pretty direct, but, obviously the impact to the neighbors, but it's also the impact on the town as a whole, because this zoning law applies to the entire town.
Right.
Next spring without anything put on it.
And I think the intent of
That's right, it'll be
section
very
538
It'll be very.
was to protect, the values
They're
of
confused.
of landowners
Yeah.
that have, a big investment in their properties, and not to have a willy-nilly
Yeah.
kind of development.
And this is a situation that, although it's historic, wherever the village, because the village is so old, this is sprawl in the sense that, I think someone driving through town, where does the village end? They would probably guess somewhere down there.
Right.
Because there's really not a distinction as to now it's rural, the village line,
Oh,
the
yeah.
taxes may stop there, but it very much is reflective of a more densely settled area.
Uh-huh. Well, I think the intent tonight is to accept the application and move forward with setting a public hearing, not just for this, but for the Salerno application. Does everybody have a copy of the worksheet, or do you just, I was just gonna give out some blank worksheets so you can mull things over.
Okay.
This being an area variance, made a few copies, so.
The worksheet touches on both, but there are specific tests
Right.
for an area
It's just,
variance and
it's
tests
just
for
the front.
use variance.
I just copied the area.
I'm sorry, I missed the introductions. Who are you?
I'm sorry, I'm Kent Manuel.
Oh, I'm
I work
sorry.
for the Delaware County Planning Department. I typically don't attend the ZBA meetings, I attend the planning board meetings, but Jeff Taggart asked that I attend.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm learning
Yep.
a lot.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I think I've met all of you in the
At one
past,
time or
whether in a
another.
professional or personal setting. so.
Right, sorry I didn't
It's been a long time.
make it.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not gonna consider any of this tonight.
Right, no, but I thought it's best
That's the
to,
worksheet, the area variance.
A public
Right.
hearing is required for your consideration of the variance, to make sure you have all the information when you're making, going through those worksheets. So it's kind of a procedural step that, you have to set a public hearing for, any of these variances, so. And I think it's great you're doing a site visit as well.
oh yeah. The seeker, we won't be considering because that's more something that would be for the,
No, you will be
Would be.
required to do that.
as part of this.
As part of this, you don't, the nuances, and we can get into that a little the next time, or can get into it. The attorney we spoke with is, if you get to a point based after your worksheets and you're considering, and your worksheets lead you to, where you're considering approval of the variance, we'll have to go through the seeker and issue a determination of significance. If it turns out based on the worksheets that, the balancing test that you guys are going to not issue the variance, we don't have to
Right.
deal with seeker. And again, it's a little foggy there because
I
we're
think that they're.
we're splitting hairs over the fact that, again, this is the,
The wetlands is really.
you know, that-
Well off the side.
I guess the end result is if you have significant adverse impacts, what that does with seeker is that makes you study it further, which in a case like this, there would really be nothing more to study. If there was more of a environmental,
But then it's such a
you know, like a disturbance issue, things like that, then that's something where they could,
It's just,
you know, look at other means of changing the project to mitigate this. And this, you're really kind of dealing with a cut and dry, you know, distance. Seeker isn't required, or it's what they call a type 2 action, which doesn't require further review if it's a single lot line variance. I don't know that this would be a lot line variance where you would just exempt it altogether, but if you're going to deny the variance, then there's no real purpose to go through, you know, the additional environmental review. But I think that's, you know, not a decision for tonight. That's after, you know, getting your public input and then going through those worksheets and weighing the pros and cons of it.
Okay. So,
There's a lot to know, huh?
there's a lot to know.
So this has two parts, actually. It's, one part is parking lot,
Mhm.
and that would be our area too?
I'm sorry?
A variance for the parking lot size, the parking spaces?
I'm not aware of that unless that's listed on information you guys got today. I think that you guys designed the parking lot to have an adequate number of spaces.
We are actually requesting a variance for the number of parking stalls.
Okay.
The required amount is 1 per 250 gross square feet of building area. That would mean we'd need about 36.4 spaces, we'll round it up to 37. We're only showing 30 spaces in total. Now, we could build it out, but we feel like it would be kind of wasteful. Dollar Generals, they don't really need more than 30 spaces, but I just wanted to show that we can build it if you guys wanted it, but I think it kind of is good to have less impervious coverage if we don't need it.
So yes, in that case, Bob, you guys are considering two separate area variances. The order of those, I suppose, you could stage however you want. Probably most appropriately, you would consider the parking lot variance if you were going to grant the variance to even allow the commercial use.
Right.
I think it's moot if you've denied the commercial use variance, then number of parking spaces really doesn't apply.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If I may, just one more variance as well. There's a lot coverage area that's supposed to be about 25% of your lot. We're requesting that 29% of the lot be covered. I mean, that's all that's really needed for our development.
And that's with the reduced number of spaces as well.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so as our spaces go up, our lot coverage goes up. So it's kind of detrimental to one variance request if we try to adhere to another.
So that would be your third and final area variance request if you get to that point.
Okay, yeah. you're
Because
right.
if you don't grant the reduced number of parking, their lot coverage goes up from 29% to whatever that would
I
be.
see.
Yeah.
If not A, B, not C. I took a logic course once.
Oh, yeah.
But
Can I
no.
just,
If I may, one more thing, I just wanted to point out, I know a gentleman, our client, was at the planning board last month presenting a plan that many people had seen that showed parking all in the front of the site. The neighbor across the street expressed concern about headlights being shining into his home. We're a little bit off from where the headlights would have been, but our client tasked us with changing the layout so that all the parking is moved now to the side of the property. So this pavement area over here, not for parking, headlights won't be shining this direction. It's just gonna be a maneuver for delivery trucks.
So just ingress and egress would be your headlights then?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And the trucks would maneuver here once a week for their delivery and then go out. So we're trying to minimize the impact to the residence that's across the street there.
How long what are the hours of Dollar Generals or Dollar stores?
I think they're about 8 to 10 is the general range that they're in. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And that's something that the planning board would look at if the variances are granted as a special permit. They could then put restrictions on the hours of operation. Good job.
We would, even though they go through secret, we still have to go through secret too, right?
That's correct, and they may or may not have to go through secret here, depending
Well,
again
I know.
how it's going to go.
Well, they
Yep.
don't, we know.
Separate issues. Yep.
Right, right. So keep this in mind that it's not just a single variance, it's several variances that they're asking for. So, does the group want to then continue down here for a field trip on the same day? The same day as
Weather
okay.
and light
Weather
permitting. Weather
light.
and light permitting.
Okay.
What day are you picking?
Next Tuesday.
Let's see. This Thursday, sunshine.
Oh, yeah,
That's about it.
yeah, tomorrow's kind of a tough day, so.
Gives you some time, though,
Yeah.
trying to tentatively set it early enough that you have a few weeks afterwards to have to.
No, I meant Thursday of next week is actually the sunshine. That's before that.
There's no sun before that?
Rain.
Wear your rain gear, folks. I've got my 100% tonight.
So, do we all have a copy of this?
You all have a copy of that? We all don't have a copy of that,
We all
no.
don't have
What
it.
do we,
But I can make some copies this week.
I'm on for just a 5,
Oh, it's
30, copy better for you.
Did you need more paper copies of our submission?
I have too much paper.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that.
I mean, not really,
take
I
an
mean,
email.
Yeah, you can have.
No, no, you keep it.
Email the
It's
submission.
all right, I memorized it.
between now and
Okay,
Tuesday.
so this one goes with
it's
this
fine.
one.
Yes.
So they caught it
But
early.
yeah,
I need a paper clip.
Cat would benefit by
Well,
having some
results
copies.
are early.
Environmental,
Good.
system,
Well, the doctor
really-
What
says,
is that?
I can't say it.
It's not certain unless we,
Nobody can say how many fish.
Nobody can say
Okay.
that.
so, that's, I don't think
Good
that.
chance. It's all the lowest, everything that she said.
Mhm.
Every one of them is the lowest it can be.
And I'm not sure that
I'm not
the
worried
time
about it.
frame, because it's on New York State 357, the consideration of your variances would require a general municipal law 239 referral, which is to the county planning board.
Right?
You could do that tonight if you'd like to. They would meet the first Wednesday of, what month is it? Meet the first Wednesday of November, gosh. And then would issue a recommendation back to this board for you guys to consider. So you really couldn't take final action until you got that recommendation back. So depending on your time frame, if you wanted to make that referral tonight, I could present that to the county planning board at their November meeting. And then at your subsequent meeting where you're considering these, you know, when you're going through the worksheets and stuff, you could make a final decision
Right.
that may make, you know, efficiency
Well,
sense.
it is, it is. It would be good to hear what they have to say as well.
I wish there was a way that I could find out the purpose of the 1,000-foot law. Is that just, I think we ought to have 1,000 feet.
Well, I think
Are-
we could certainly, you know, reach at the intent of it. And as far as that specific number, I'm not sure when it was developed, what, you know, what that was, if that was taken from something else.
Is that from our?
That is
zoning
your
board?
zoning law, yep.
Okay.
I mean, 1,000 feet in the sense of a, you know, and that's where you're looking at this as it's, you know, I think they're thinking as far as a buffer.
Yeah,
And industrial could be any industrial. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Commercial, industrial. I mean, it
Yeah.
could be a factory.
Factory or
It could
something.
be, you
Which
know.
would be different. In my mind, it would be a different thought.
Well, it depends, you know, the larger the building, the, you know, the more people want to be away from it, but.
And that's the difficult role you guys are gonna play, is without questioning what the zoning law says.
Mhm.
You know, that is the local law that's on the books here, so that it's not necessarily, well, I think that's too much. You know, we
Yeah.
kind kind of have to acknowledge the fact that that is the zoning law and that's what's set up, and so you guys are weighing the impacts as if you were to reduce that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, it could be any number of commercial uses of you know, varying magnitudes, but the idea being some separation between those uses. I mean, I would also say Franklin has zoning districts that, as much as they're R, or, you know, R1, R3, they're not residential, they're rural, so they allow a variety of uses, so I think it provides some, I don't want to say protection, may not be the right word, but some, like a little further scrutiny if there are these mixed uses, rather than kind of parceling it up into very specific parcels, you have very general zones.
Right.
I'm guessing at it, but I think that section was added to kind of enhance the fact that, you know, your zone allows, you know, commercial use and residential use of varying degree. So it's giving some kind of separation of those uses, whether they thought that would make some harmony or a little less impact from one to the other. Again, I'm just really kind of grabbing at that, but I think based on the way it's set up, I think that was their intent.
Or a little more protection. And I don't know, I can't even remember when we redid those laws, how that came about, or if that was existing.
That was in your existing law that was adopted in, well, I don't have, 1990.
90, yeah.
So that was in there when it was revised in 2007 and was kept in.
Yeah, I think it had to do with the rural character of the community.
So it was, you know, whether, I can't again speak to how deliberate or conscious of that, but it was brought up during the review, and the town board, you know, voted to approve a zoning law that kept that in.
Right,
Yeah.
I don't remember actually going over that particular thing when we were revising. We just kept it the way it was and
Yeah.
didn't think any more about it, I guess, so.
I actually remember some specific
Talk about it.
conversation with the consultant about it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't recall if your board or the town board or if anybody said, hey, we want that in there still, but that came up during our initial review of it as a section to consider.
Okay.
Because it is unique. You don't see it in a lot of communities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, this community has to be like the one next to it or the other ones in Delaware County or Suffolk County for that matter.
No,
We
just
are unique.
even the last guy that was here from the people that buy the land and build the building, he said normally or on the average, it's about 500 feet, which is still, they would need a variance
right.
no matter what.
Right, sure.
Yeah, I think the difficulty of it is, again, is that they're not even rural lots. It's that you're in a very, you know,
Populated area.
a smaller, more densely settled, you know, in essence, a kind of a village character there because of it being on the outskirts of that village.
Barely.
Probably the village was probably incorporated in what, you know, possibly 1800s. I'm sure it's an old village, as many of them are. So
1836.
there you go. So.
Okay, good.
As historic as some of these homes are, they probably weren't, you know, they may or may not have even been there. Certainly the log cabin wasn't, but as far as the property across the street that's been brought up, that may be certainly after that.
Well, the late 1800s probably.
Yeah.
Like our house is 1810.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But, you know, those are the current conditions. Had the village annexed those properties, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
Nor would the realty company be looking for an approval, given the current conditions, because if it was to occur in the village, there is no review. It's a building permit.
Just add one thing. We took a radius of 1,000 feet in the town of Franklin, and in every R1 district, we tried to fit that radius in, and we couldn't find one property where a commercial use would be allowed in the whole town. So it was so a little bit
whole town?
restrictive. Yeah.
I don't
I can't
see
believe
how
that.
how that would happen.
Well,
Maybe off of state and county
yeah,
highways.
state and county.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, well, that's the zone for R1.
Right.
That's
Oh, oh, in
this-
R1.
this
I got
zone.
you.
Well,
Yeah,
You wouldn't want to put it on the back road anyhow.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because the distance is always horizontal. Follow grid.
Yeah.
We were looking straight there.
And again, whether this board or the public or the applicants agree with the, you know, what the town has, that is the rule that they had at this time. So
right.
if that the town is wishing to limit, commercial development, that certainly could be a means of doing so. I can't really speak to that. So if you guys were so inclined to make the referral to the county planning board for 239 review, you would need a motion
Oh, right.
as well as a motion to set the hearing.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second to make the referral to the county planning board for their November meeting. I got 2 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, we need to vote to accept these applications then. I make the motion we accept both applications for review.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
This one I can take. You want to take this?
Are we late?
What meeting are you looking for?
This is for planning?
The planning board meeting starts at 7:30, but you're welcome to have a seat.
Oh, okay. George? My grandson wants to observe, so
Oh, okay.
this will be good.
So I think also at this time, it would be appropriate to set a public hearing date for both applications. I believe we have 62 days to do that from tonight. So that puts us into December. And I was looking at December, let's see, if we kept the same, I think it's the 2nd. No, it's the 3rd. So, December 3rd is a Tuesday. Is that bad for you?
Is that the first Tuesday?
Yeah, it
The
is.
town board,
Town board meeting.
yes.
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
I mean, I could do the first Thursday again if that works for you guys.
Yeah, that gets complicated for me.
Yeah, Thursday don't work for me. Then
Well,
why
we
not-
can meet
why not-
any night.
Why not Monday?
How about the 2nd? Monday night? Monday night work for everybody?
Is that the first Monday?
Yeah.
I don't think I can. I have Fleischmann's.
What about the 4th, the first Wednesday? I don't think there's anything in here Wednesday.
The county planning board, but I could maybe have somebody else present this.
I'm just,
I have a very difficult meeting schedule.
gosh, you do. You must be out more nights than you're
The
in.
first 2 weeks are very busy,
Okay.
and then the third Monday is Bavina. Then after that, it's pretty open.
We can go back to the week before Thanksgiving.
I'm
Oh.
not here.
You're not here that week?
I'm gone. I'm down at my parents'. and we're-
Yeah, I won't be here.
Are you here in the beginning of the week?
No, we're not.
Oh.
Here and here.
Oh,
This is-
man, that
we just
sounds
saw
like a
that.
lot of vacation for you.
Well, this is the Mayo Clinic actually, and then this is my parents, so.
Mhm.
I mean,
Jeez.
What'd
I
you say
know-
about Monday night?
the first Monday I have a meeting in Fleischmann's.
Oh, okay. That's
So all the communities that we contract with, they have a
Right.
regular meeting night.
So when are you available?
Could
the
could we
first-
still do it in, earlier in November?
Yeah, we could. Person isn't here, so that puts us into Veterans Day week. Which is fine with me because we'll have the opinion from
Tuesdays are pretty open for me.
Tuesdays? Okay, so Veterans Day is the 11th, so Tuesday, the next day is the 12th. That work for everybody? 12th of November? Is that a little bit?
What time, 6?
I think 6 is good if it works for you guys. It's gonna be dark
And this is the
anyway.
public, this is the public hearing.
That would be the public hearing for both of these paper, as I normally do.
I just gotta make sure I look like him.
Okay. Why don't we do it
I'm
tentatively?
pretty damn sure
Okay,
I'm around there.
okay.
You said Tuesday, right?
It's a Tuesday. Tuesday the 12th
Okay.
At 6.
at 6.
Let's see, we're drawing this out of office.
Right. True. Yeah,
We'll make the decision immediately here.
right. Now, after the public hearing, we still have time, don't we? Or do we don't have to decide that night?
You don't. And that could certainly factor into whether I'm here or not. If you guys aren't making a decision that night, you may not need, I mean, all you're doing is taking comment, thank you for your comment,
Right.
and closing your meeting.
But we can have, you have to have the hearing by, in 62 days.
You do, and then
Yeah.
after that, you have 62 days to
More
act.
days,
That-
right.
There's 62 more days.
Right.
So that, if
Okay.
that, changes your guys'
So that
schedule,
changes
I think Jeff was more
Yeah.
concerned as far as procedure when you're actually getting to the point where you're taking action, that he wanted me to be available to you guys.
So they can look at it when you're
If
not.
you wanted to have the public hearing on your own, I'd love to miss a public hearing.
We want you to be
I already
here
made one
the
here
fun.
for it. Yeah, I won't speak during the public hearing, it's not any of my purview there, I'm advising you guys.
Okay, so within 62 days of the public hearing, the ZBA shall render a decision. So at the public hearing, we'll set another meeting date.
That makes sense.
So we're keeping November?
Yep.
Okay,
That work for everybody?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll see you next week. Hopefully it'll be sunny.
hopefully.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Next month.
Shall we make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Okay,
Next week's your site visit. That's what she was talking
I'll second that.
Okay.
Next week is the 7th, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry. Okay, that's Tuesday, right, Tuesday. Monday we're at the cemetery, Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's all Tuesdays. We're doing everything on Tuesday.
Right.
Tuesday,
Okay, so Tuesday, 5 PM for the site visit, and then November 12th, Tuesday, 6 PM for the public hearing. Okay.
about. And you guys adjourned.
What was that?
You guys adjourned your meeting.
Yes, we
Yeah.
did. At
So this is the
7:10.
meeting of the zoning board of appeals, so you can say you attended a zoning board of appeals meeting as well. I don't know if the planning board has any business tonight, so they'll be showing up here, but short of them approving the minutes, they're not gonna have much. So you got to actually see some of the procedural steps of the zoning board.
2 for 1.
That's right. Extra credit, right?
Yeah, I think we should speak to people. You mean people in town? Oh, these folks. Oh, yeah, no, I think we should, yeah.
On the right door, and this was the second motion was.
Oh, I think to adjourn.
Our last motion to adjourn, our public hearing,
Oh, okay.
November
All
12th.
And then,
Move
all
for
right.
the plan.
We
And then
did,
refer to the.
we did
Okay, all right, so I
refer to
did.
the county planning board. We accepted both applications.
Oh, accepted, all right, that's what I
Okay.
missed.
Okay,
I
yeah.
turned around and I missed it.
That's
Blink of an
okay.
eye. Thank you.
And then as far as the notice for the hearing, I'm just gonna look it up, but I believe it requires that notices be sent. Let me just check here.
Oh, yeah, it does. We've
Yeah,
had-
so
we've
the
had
applicant is
several.
gonna have to notify in writing all landowners within 500 feet of the parcel, the project parcel. And that's by certified return receipt.
And those receipts need to come here for,
For the hearing to start,
Prior to.
right.
for the hearing to begin, you'll have to hand those receipts to the chairwoman.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to, they don't have to open their mail, a lot of people don't like certified mail, so, but you'll have the proof
Yeah,
of
have the
mailing.
proof
You'll
of
probably get a
mailing,
bunch
yeah.
back from people who do accept it, but just make sure you have all the receipts.
Okay.
And that was within, before 10 days of the hearing itself.
That's
They
right.
have to receive them, so what I generally have been doing is I develop the notice, and then I'll send it to you.
To me, and then I can mail
Right.
it as needed.
Right.
Okay. Excellent.
You can get a list of all the properties within 500 feet from the county tax office,
Okay.
so you have the most current.
Yeah, that's the best way to get that
It's
list.
gonna bring in some properties because the lots probably aren't that, well, I don't know. Hard to say.
Yeah,
But it'll bring in properties that we're not necessarily thinking about because it's gonna bring in the back of the property.
Behind us or something.
Yeah. And I don't, that site doesn't exist, right? Those lot lines
Yeah.
don't exist.
They own more land.
So whatever that
and
tax
we're
parcel
subdivided. So
is-
whatever touches this big.
The large parcel is
Okay.
500 feet from
Okay.
that, yep.
All right, so we'll get a lot of stamps.
so you actually don't have, that parcel has not been subdivided yet.
Correct, yes. That'll be,
Yep.
assuming everything goes.
And do you guys have any paperwork as far as authorization from the landowner to act on their behalf?
I do,
Okay.
I can get it to you.
Yeah, I would bring that for the hearing certainly, or send it to Mary Ann
Yeah.
when you can.
Do you have any authority with the tax map? You gotta get that
Well,
thing off
hey,
Adobe.
hey.
I can't run Adobe on any of my apples.
Oh yeah, we're not Apple friendly.
No, you're
Oh,
not
no.
Apple friendly
No
at all.
government.
No, it's for a PC. Yep.
No way.
I gotta pull up my old computer
Yeah,
from the
my
basement, blow the dust off of
My
it.
office does maintain, or we're the ones that do the Comet site, yeah.
Oh,
Well, you
get
guys
off
have
of
a good
Adobe.
evening.
Yeah. Nobody uses Apple.
We'll see you on Tuesday.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I got my notes. It won't be too bad.
Although with the phones and stuff, I guess millions of people use Apple. But as far as a workstation, very few.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that.